Welcome everyone to our very first UW Extension Sheep Task Force webinar. We're really excited to have this group together this evening and spend a little time talking about innovations in the lambing barn. My name is Micah Most. I am the Ag and Natural Resources Extension Educator based in the Johnson County office. So I'm here in Buffalo and have the pleasure of being one of the hosts for this evening. So just a quick roadmap of what our time together is going to look like. I will give a brief overview or introduction to the Sheep Task Force and our short history and kind of what our goals and purpose are. We will then meet our hosts for the rest of the evening, Whit Stewart and Michaela Getz. And then we have our two featured guest speakers, well, three technically, Regan Smith and Kristin and Bieber. Very excited to hear from them on the work that they've been doing in their operations. And then finally, we'll be wrapping up with an open floor Q&A and taking questions from the audience. And the way this webinar is set up, you will not be able to use the chat function, so please submit your questions using the Q&A box that you should be able to see at the bottom of your screen. You might have to move your mouse around a little bit to be able to navigate over to the Q&A, but that's where you're going to be submitting your questions. I do also want to point out to everyone that this webinar is being recorded, and we will be distributing that through the university's YouTube channel once we get the video edited and everything's good to go. So that's what we have this evening, and there will be a few announcements at the end, of course, as always. So the Sheep Task Force really grew out of this need for statewide education. We started kind of coming together and doing this work last summer, and we hosted an in-person gathering in October, and that was university specialists, extension educators, producers from around the state, kind of in a small pilot event to see how we need to be helping each other do our work. And ultimately, we came together in this partnership and put together some language that I'm not going to read this word for word here, but we're working together to combine our evidence-based research that's happening at the university level and bringing that to people that are able to make decisions based off that information on the ground. And so we're working with collaboratively across our different spaces, ultimately to serve sheep producers in Wyoming and beyond. So that is the goal, the mission, the intent of the UW Extension Sheep Task Force. And this is a list of all of the different contributors that we've had to the task force so far. So Dr. Stewart is our sheep extension specialist at the University of Wyoming. McKenna, Michaela, Dagan, Dan, and myself, Micah, are all county-based ag and natural resources extension educators. And we also have Rob, who is our livestock production and marketing specialist. Brian is a research scientist in ag economics based at the Sustainable Ag Research and Extension Center in Lingle. Dylan Laverell is a really key player as one of Whit's master's students and contributing his perspective also as a producer. And then finally, Lindsay Conley Stewart has done a lot of work with us on the visuals and communications approach of the task force as a project coordinator with the College of Agriculture. So this is kind of our team structure, and we're still taking on new members as we have some new educators joining the team with UW Extension. But that is the makeup of the Sheep Task Force as far as the extension and university-based side of this. We do have a lot of producer partners around the state as well. I didn't take the time to list them all here, but we have a lot of great people that have collaborated with us in this work as well. Here are our wonderful panelists for this evening. I wanted to take a moment to thank them again for giving their time and sharing their experiences and expertise with us. So we have, again, Regan Smith of Smith Sheep and Stuff, and Kristin and Bieber of Bieber Land and Livestock and Skull Creek Targhee with us this evening. So thank you to the three of you for sharing your time and information with us. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Whit and Michaela.
Thank you, Micah, and appreciate the overview of the task force. We're excited for this format of programming for our sheep industry, but also really excited to pilot this forum, which is for producers and by producers. So we're excited about that. A couple of things before I introduce our first panelist, I want to just point to some references that are out there to help us think about sheep facility and how we adapt those, both from a spatial dimension standpoint, also to the size of different housing systems that we may need. And so this sheep housing and equipment handbook is available online, both through purchase on Amazon or through Iowa State Extension or other outlets. But I really think this is helpful for those that are thinking about how do I improve my facilities and how do I get some of those metrics to help me understand how to size things. I think this is a really good resource. Some of what we're going to call upon also as we move into talking with Regan, the ventilation of sheep structures as we started some of these initial efforts working with Regan on his ventilation system. This is another really good article that walks through some examples of how you would coordinate and calculate the various, how much air needs to be moved, how you do some of those calculations. So wanted to highlight those before we go too far. Next slide, please. I think also as we move into talking about this, and Michaela, you can interrupt me as we go on. There's various ventilation systems in our shed lambing systems in the upper Midwest, Intermountain West and Northern Plains. And I think the level to which we are able to implement these changes to our structures is going to vary. And as you're well aware, the challenge that we're going to get into as we talk with Regan is in the wintertime, especially for those that are lambing in some of the more adverse climatic events, which seems to coincide with everything we're doing. The real challenge is how do we move some of this warm, humid air and replace it with dry air without losing all the temperature in the lambing shed? And I think that's where I'm excited to introduce our first panelist today. Michaela, any great introductions for Regan? I think you spent an afternoon taking photos with him, so you probably got some good material.
I definitely have a lot of material here. It was really great to meet Regan. I'm new to the area, so I appreciate what the introduction from you to Regan, really, being here in Park County and everything like that. And, something I think that's important to really highlight too is, when talking about these materials and everything like this, and I think something that maybe Regan will talk about too is you don't have to go out and purchase a whole lot of brand new material and spend a lot of money there. You can use materials that you might already have and repurpose some of the stuff that you've got there that has been used before. So I think that was something that really opened my eyes and that Regan took a lot of time to walk me through. And I hope the photos that I went out and took will really highlight that. And so, hopefully we're going to jump into Regan here, but without further ado, Regan Smith Sheep and Stuff, and out of Powell, Wyoming. Am I missing anything? What?
No, that's perfect. Let's go to the next slide. We'll let Regan tell us about himself.
Yeah, please.
I've got a guide here on the screen. Regan, can you see this guide here?
Yeah. Yeah, we're a diversified farm and livestock operation. Now we're switching from Smith Sheep and Stuff to Bitter Creek Land and Livestock. My youngest is back from college and livestock judging coach at our junior college, and we've come up with a integration plan to bring him in to the operation. The picture there in the background is at our mountain permits, shipping yearling ewes, probably, I would imagine, if what was there. Trails I share with Kane Eves. And so, yeah, we've this is my 53rd year of lamb and sheep, and this will be my 50th year of farming. So I've seen a few things and learned a few, and you learn something every day and every year.
Regan, highlight, so you have your commercial ewe enterprise, about 1,100 ewes. Talk to us briefly about how you source ewes and your philosophy on good terminal sires real quick.
Well, I started in the sheep business with a set of Hampshire sheep in 4-H and 71, and did the show thing through 4-H and FFA, and earned my American Farmer degree, and went off to college and came back and kind of dropped the purebred registered line of it, but kept a set of commercial blackface ewes that are hamp based. Always use pretty much purebred registered hamp rams that I can find around the country, and I've always concentrated on weight per day of age. Everything I sell off this place is by the pound, whether it be a cull ewe or a cull cow, except for the few commercial rams that I sell, and maybe some commercial or blackface ewe lambs. Everything else is by the pound. So the weight per day of age was always my emphasis. And as the ribeye testing came around, and that we've integrated that, and we've loin-eyed and trying to get up and going on the NSIP. We gather the data. We just haven't had anybody time enough to sit down and put it in the computer. And by doing that, and being on a farm here where we've got range operation from May till late October, early November, but we've sourced my ewes, the commercial ewes. I always tell people our commercial flock is one of everything and two of most. We're always in the market for a set of younger ewes that somebody's getting out of the business or whatever. When we're lambing this early, lambing yearlings, we certainly have lambed our share of yearlings, but a more older, mature ewe is better than trying to lamb a yearling in January that's 18 months old or whatever. And so we've just bought ewes from around the country and have put them together. We feed some ewe lambs, and we'll retain some of those into the flock, but try to sell most of them as open yearling ewes off the mountain in August before we put our bucks in. We put our bucks in around the middle of August and start lambing around the 10th of January.
So the 10th of January, Regan, puts a lot of the emphasis on why we're here today talking about these things. Micah, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. Where it started, I guess, Regan, I put up some of the metrics that we initially visited about when we went to reference the Du Bois sheep station ventilation system and how we could adapt it. So when we visited this morning, give us a description of this barn, and you went ahead and really insulated it good about a couple years ago now, before you made this ventilation investment. Walk us through that.
Like I said, there's been livestock on this farm for over 100 years, and we've got a lot of low barns that are 16 foot deep with just a sloped roof. But over the progression of growing this farm, we purchased another farm that had a very large 60 by 160 shop for the farm tractor work and so on. And the shop that my dad had built in '63 was a nice steel building, but we weren't utilizing it very well after we moved into the other shop. It was just kind of a storage and whatever. And we were needing more jugs. If you're lambing in January, you can't have enough help and you can't have enough sheds. And we were looking around at adding on to some other sheds. And I looked at that barn and that steel shop. I said, we've got 3 mothering pins in there that we use down the middle of it, and then storage and stuff and collecting on the sides. We're really not utilizing this building. It was a very well built Cuckler building, and in '63 that was a big building. And we thought, well, hell, let's clean out all of the 2 or 3 generations of I actually am the 4th generation on this place. Let's clean out the stuff here and look at this building and make it into a lambing barn that we can use and then clean out. And we also use it we lamb or calve our cows in March, and every once in a while you need to put a cow inside. So anyhow, we looked it over, and when that building was built, there was one small, about 2 by 3 window. And I'm a big believer in sunlight and having natural light in a shed rather than being so dark. And so on the one side, we put, I don't know if you got some more pictures, Michaela, that'll show what we did, but we put
we can go to the
tremendous
next slide.
set of windows on one side, and that's Du Bois.
That's Du Bois. This was the template, Regan. This was
I went to Du Bois and saw their system, and there's our shop, or what we refer to it now as the sheep shop. And so we put a whole set of windows on the south side, and some on the west side, and some on the east side, and paid to have it insulated, and replaced the old doors. The original shop doors were sliding doors, and we put insulated overhead doors in. And then on the far corner to the right here, there was a walk-in door that was used for the milk cow back in the day. And Then we put a heater down the center. You can see there's a gas heater down the center of it, and away we went. And the first year or so, that building was so tight that the humidity in there was quite high. And I had a girl that had come to do an internship with me from North Carolina. When she went from here to Du Bois, I'd heard about the Du Bois system, and I went over to visit her and look at that system. And those guys said they had 4 huge fans in that new barn, 2 to blow air in and 2 to blow air out. And they said, the air up and where the people are at, they said was fine, but down below you could still see the humidity when they'd open the doors and stuff, when you take a sheep in and out. And those guys looked it over, and they came up with this system of sucking the cold, wet air off the ground instead of just pulling it up out of the top of the building, which you see in most ventilation systems, like in a farm shop where you're trying to pull the smoke and dust out. And it made perfect sense. And they said it made a tremendous difference in their barn of the ammonia smell and whatever. And they, of course, being a government facility and not knowing that we're going broke in this country, they went overboard, and they had a pipe, one of those vents in every jug, and I don't remember how many jugs is in that barn.
Yeah, you can go back to that slide, Micah, real quick.
Yeah. And I didn't think that was probably totally necessary. And I started talking to Whit and to what, I don't remember how they engineered what they did over there as far as how much air to move. But I did some rough calculations and had some people look at it, and had some ventilation people in Cody look at it. And I've got a nephew that went to the Naval Academy and got a systems engineering degree. And so he had a little background and all that, and then actually worked for a company in Spokane that did some ventilation, and came up with the idea of the fan, or the size of the fan we needed. And then if you go back to the last picture we just had up there, I had somebody price me a duct system to go down that. And I don't remember, they wanted $2,000 or $3,000. And of course they were going to make it a little bit fancier and step it down like they did in Du Bois, like a normal ventilation system in a commercial building. You start with one size and pipe it down as you get farther away from your heat source or your ventilation source. And what you see up there on the top is tin, and there's a steel frame around that holds it to the red iron in that steel building. And then inside of that tin, there is a wooden 2x4 frame to help that tin so it doesn't collapse. And we just literally rolled that tin into a tube. And then my son and another smaller worker actually, the tin was in 20-foot lengths, I believe, or 16. We would put a piece of wood in there that we could screw to, and then it came out quite square. And we ran those tubes the first year just on the outside walls, and then the next year when we had a little more time, we ran some more down the center. If there's some more pictures of that barn, you'll see that there's a set of jugs down the center, and then the walls are what we call quads. There's 4 jugs in a section, and then a little alley to get into them. And I believe we're up to about 16 drops in there. And the room you see clear in the back is actually a saddle room. And before we put this ventilation system in there, those saddles and stuff were so saturated with moisture, it was unbelievable. And the doors would freeze shut, and even with the windows open, you got to have air coming in, but you got to have air going out, I think is the bottom line. And by pulling that air off the bottom, if you come in the wintertime, if the windows start to steam up and get steam on them, back over here where that brown door is where the exit fan is, you can see. And there's a switch there, and that fan is way oversized for what the CFS that was kind of recommended. But I put that fan on a timer, and so it'll run 5 out of 30 minutes or 10 out of 30 or 12 or whatever we want. And as we don't have a humidifier or a gauge in there to test the moisture, but if you start to see collection of dew or humidity on the windows, we just crank it up a little bit more. And
now, Regan, you said you oversized that fan, which is a big consideration. Have you seen, I mean, when you first kicked this on, did you notice the difference in pressure in that building to start moving?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that red door swings in, and if that door's not shut tight, it'll pull that door open. And the other door, the brown door you see, swings the other way, and it'll pull that door shut. I mean, I don't remember I was going to try to look up what we put in there for a fan. But I would highly recommend that you go oversized rather than undersized, because it's like buying a truck. You can always haul less if you don't need to haul them, but you got the truck to haul it if you need it.
That's a
And if
great
you're
point.
undersized, then you're going to be running that thing continuously.
Now, Regan,
And
this is 71 jugs. You said 71 U capacity, and you have another barn with about that same capacity, a lambing shed? Or...
yes, yep.
And so,
Yeah, at least that many more. We can hold 100, and since we put this barn up, the other jug barn, there's another main jug barn that's been added onto and built onto. We haven't even had to put all the jugs up. We've got enough room that we haven't so far haven't hit us. But we've also done a lot of things over 50 years to figure out how to space our lambing out, so you don't have those nights where you have 150 ewes lamb where you just can't keep everything picked up.
and Regan, on the cost side of things, I know this is one of those questions that clearly you've used some repurposed material and you chose some more cost-effective means after getting some of those quotes, but walk us through just rough math on the materials that it cost you.
I looked up in the fan, and that ductwork comes in a tube, and it's aluminum, and you stretch it out. And where we're not don't have any support, we use those. On the far side in the back, you'll see some that are actually nothing more than dryer duct. Just like you put it in a house. And we clean these barns with Bobcat, and so those ones in the center will come out and just swing up to the roof, and the ones in the wall stay there all the time, so we don't have to take them down. But that way we can drive a pickup in there in the summertime or whatever we need to do, and those jugs will all come out. Where that's actually connected, I looked at using pipe, like 15-inch plastic pipe. Well, we all know what that cost of that did after the pandemic. And then also when you go to round, and how do you connect those two round tubes together? What's actually connection that flex to that ductwork is what you put in a house to put a toilet on. That's what I found that would fit that pipe, and it's just hose clamped up there. There's a fancier name for it, but I bought a case of them, and that screws into that pipe. We used a hole saw, made a hole, and then bolted it to it and siliconed it. And to be right honest with you, the far end of that ductwork over that saddle room is not totally blocked off yet. That fan was so big that it's sucking the air off the top of that. We've got a sheet of plywood there that we've kind of played with, and until I get some more of those ducts dropped down, I really don't think I want to shut that completely off.
Now, Regan, you mentioned I love the fact that we're using these repurposed materials, and for sake of time, we didn't have some of these other images of some of the other handling facilities, but there's a lot of trial and error in this, and the experience you have putting it together shows. I mean, you mentioned one thing you would have changed had to do with the windows. Walk us through that, if you wouldn't mind, real quick.
Yeah, the garage door that's open there actually just got put in last year. We had a garage door that we'd replaced there before we made it into a sheep shop that wasn't insulated. And that garage door, when it's down, there's two vents that we put in above the window layer that are up high. When I mounted all those windows, I wanted to let air in the summer and whatever, so I put the openings, to where you can walk over and grab them. They're about chest high. In hindsight, it would be better if when we're letting air in, because when that fan kicks on, you got to be able to let air in. And I've got louvers in that garage door, two sets of louvers in that garage door, and I've threatened to put a louver system that'll open and close on the north end, which is the way that those pictures are taken, would be the north end of the building. But I'm a little afraid to do that when we have those real cold winds and stuff. Even if that louver needs to come into the building when the fan kicks on, with the winds we get around here, I'm afraid it would let more cold air in than we need, and the heater would have to run more than necessary. But if I'd have made those windows backwards from natural, or what you would naturally think, and had the opening at the top of those walls, you would be pulling that air in at the top, making it come to the bottom and picking up the cold and going out. And engineers tell you that'll carry more moisture than warm air, pulling that. Plus it would circulate that air like that. But if the one other fault I made behind that brown door is the lights to turn, or the switch to turn the lights on, and in that same block is where there's a switch you can turn that fan completely off or completely on. And when you walk in that red door and you think, God, there's ammonia in here again, you look down there, somebody has turned both switches off, they've turned the lights off and the fan off.
Yeah.
And you go down there and turn that fan on, and you instantly can tell the change in the air.
Yeah.
Regan, let's talk just, I mean, obviously the investments made, you've noticed a difference, but I think the real question is, have you seen a decrease in your respiratory issues in your lambs? Do you see better health in your mixing pens? I mean, did it work? And talk to us through some of the vet animal health implications you think you've improved.
You know, I don't have facts and figures that'll show that we have less pneumonia. I think this will be our third year with it. I think this is our third year with it. The first year we didn't have near enough pipes in, but the air quality in there is immensely better than it is in the old sheds where we just have a fan pulling air out, and we've got some vents in the top of it. You know, they're just straight sloped roofs. You can feel the air, you know, smell and feel the air difference in the urine and the burn on your eyes. And this barn is so much better than it is in the other barns. And I haven't quite come up with a system to use in the other ones yet that'll allow us to keep cleaning and do what we do. Yeah, it's just drier and healthier in there all the way around. I don't, you know, agriculture is an art, not a science. And in my art mind, I think this is definitely helping. And the boys and do boys, I think they would agree. They put it in the old barns and the new barns both after they came up with it. They don't just suck the air out of the top anymore.
Yeah, it was
that's an easy way to do it, and you do get some air exchange, but you're pulling your dry, warm air out of the top. If you just put a fan in where most fans are in most buildings, you're pulling the warm, dry air out of the top and not the cold, wet air that goes to the bottom.
When you said it, Regan, if it hurts your eyes at your level of height, right? If it's a lamb that close to the surface where that ammonia is volatilizing, it's really gonna be a
in this barn
deal.
we try to use, well, we do use pretty much nothing but sawdust, and it doesn't decompose, and I don't think it makes the ammonia as bad as it does in a straw barn, but it is a hassle to keep packing wheelbarrows of sawdust in there. It's a lot faster to bed the other shed with straw than it is that one. So,
well, this is great, Regan. There's going to be some questions that we get from our participants, but I think at this point we could.
I suppose our out of pocket, you know, by the time I bought those toilet things here locally and stuff, I'm sure our cash expense is probably $4,000 there, but I don't see where there's going to be a lot of long-term maintenance. You know, it's not bulletproof by any means, but we haven't had to do a lot of. We've just added more vents. We haven't had to spend any more money in maintenance.
Well, it sounds like 20 lambs sold or saved, Regan. Your system is likely already paid for itself, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. Good. Well, I want to.
Plus, the pleasure of working in there is a lot nicer too.
Well, we should bring Wendy on and ask her what she thinks too.
Yeah, let's not do that.
So let's open it up to some questions just briefly before we again, to remind you, we'll have time at the end to ask some more panel discussion, and that's going to be opened up to everything from ventilation to what you think your mixing pens look like and other questions that anyone has burning. Michaela, am I missing anything? Do you have any other questions for Mr. Smith?
No, you guys went really in depth there and covered a lot of it. I was going to ask you, Regan, more about the moisture that, you know, you kind of highlighted to me about that cold pneumonia sitting there on the bottom, but you covered it. So
awesome.
As we're waiting for some questions to maybe roll in from our attendees this evening, I do have a question for Michaela. As you were walking up to see this barn in person, was this the first lambing barn that you've experienced? And what was your impression?
Yeah, so outside of, you know, doing FFA and 4-H activities as a kid, yes. I come from a, you know, cattle, livestock, and row crop family. So yes, and my first one in Wyoming for sure. And my thoughts were there's a lot going on. Regan's got like on, he's got barns and, you know, he had a whole lot of bucks, you know, in the back and everything that he let me see and everything. So that was pretty neat as well. And you guys had just sheared them, whatever the past tense is there. And so that was really neat to see. And then you guys had some lambs there in the barn, which was also neat. And so walking through that and getting to see everything you guys had done was just a really neat experience. I didn't obviously get to see any of the before, but just, you know, everything that Regan walked everybody through just now, getting to see it in person and then capturing these photos, it was just, again, it was just really neat. So I'm happy that I was able to do that. And again, thank you for sending me out here, because it was really neat to see.
Well, be sure you come back when we're dragging lambs in and out of there if you think it was busy today, because it was very calm. It was very calm when you were here this time.
Well, and it's funny too, you talk about the difference in, you know, having your ventilation system in this barn versus your other ones, because you're right, as soon as you step into the other ones, it hits you. So it's really easy to see how much this fan and your systems work here versus your others. You know, just talking about that vet care and everything.
And the other barn has a fan in it. It just doesn't work to the extent of this.
Right.
Regan, we got a good question that came in on how you set your thermostat for the heater. We should have mentioned that you spray foamed your shop before you put in this ventilation system. Just tell us your heating requirements briefly.
All of our barns have some source of heat. The other two the other barn has 2 propane heaters in it. This has that gas heater you can see in the top. And if you look to the left of that middle ventilation system, you'll see a thermostat coming down there to the right of that red door, kind of right there. There's actually a brown door there, and the first thermostat we had in there didn't last very long with the dust and so on, and we went to an electronic one, and the lowest we can set it is 40, and I don't think we hardly ever go much below the mid 40s. The gas comes in on the back of the building there that you can see, and when they put that in, they said that's where the heat is the hottest in those tube heaters like that. And that being that close to that garage door and so on, you know, that it's not the coldest spot in the barn, but it's certainly not the warmest spot. And 40 degrees, but with the natural light and, you know, 50-60 sheep in there, it's on the same gas meter as our house, so I obviously cannot tell you how much gas we burn, but it doesn't take a lot of heat. But I think it's key, if you're going to be lambing in the conditions I do in January and February, that you have some source of heat that's dry rather than just sheep body heat. If you have nothing but sheep body heat in a real low shed, you definitely need some air, because it gets really wet in there. But yeah, that heater doesn't go the whole length of the building, but I believe it's those are 10-foot sections, and I believe there's 40 foot of it there.
Well, it doesn't sound like you're having to put a lot of heat in there with,
no,
especially if it's full.
No, but there is dry heat, you know, and obviously the center jugs that are right underneath of that, if we got some colder, wetter lambs or something or other, or some weaker lambs, we try to put those down that center there. But the water buckets, those jugs are all still hand watered, and there's never ice on any buckets in that barn, never. Or there hasn't been, and we went through that god awful spell in January. So,
well,
yeah, great. Thank you so much for that question, David. I think we'll go ahead and hold any other questions for Regan until we get to the end of our time together this evening. Thank you again, Regan, so much for your time this evening and for giving us an inside peek at your operation. It's yeah, a real testament. Yeah, exactly. Alrighty. I think we're ready to go ahead and move into the second portion of our webinar this evening. So we're going to welcome Cord and Kristin now, and there they are. I can see them.
Right, there we are.
Yep. Take it away, Whit.
Cord and Kristin, it's an honor to have you on tonight. We're grateful and would express that gratitude also to Regan. I know it's lambing season for everybody, right? And looks like you guys are still happily married, and that will be a question for the panel later on. Lambing season will always test that. But Cord and Kristin Bieber, I will let them give an introduction, but I will speak to their ingenuity and their adoption of technology and looking at things through a critical eye and taking a look at their labor allocations and their time allocations and using technology to work for them. So as we move on to the next slide, I'm going to ask Cord and Kristin to just give us a brief overview of your operation, Bieber Land and Livestock, and then Skull Creek Targhees.
We rock, paper, scissors who got to talk about this, and I lost. We both of us are fourth generation here in Eastern Montana. I'm fourth generation sheep rancher, Cord's second generation. We're a mix of registered and commercial Targhees. The registered and some of the commercial are run on NSIP, so data is a pretty big push in our operation. Started with the registered animals, transitioned into the commercial, and we take data on everything at this point because it makes me happy. We utilize both shed lambing and range lambing. When the sheep get down to being range lambers, they're range lambers forever, but some of the shed lambers can transition into range lambers depending upon their performance. Most of our push is for seed stock sales and obviously feeder lambs. Yeah, I think that's about it as far as kind of what we do, what the push for the place is.
And Kristin, Cord, help me conceptualize a little bit. How many animals are you running through the shed versus what you're range lambing? And where is the majority of the data collected as we move into talking about data?
Definitely the larger portion of the sheep are the shed lambers. It really, with our drought condition and grasshoppers the last 5 years, we've downsized the range lamb portion of it. I would say it's 2/3 range lammer, 1/3, or 2/3 shed lammers, 1/3 range lammers. Just because of the higher lambing percentage on the shed lammers and what you can get off per ewe comparative to the range lammers. Downside is the shed lammers are definitely more work than the range lammers. But most of the data we collect is off of the shed lammers. We do collect some data off of the range lammers. All of our ewes have EID tags in them, even the range lammers. And the range lambs that we keep end up with EID tags in them, so we can keep track of weight gain over the winter and who's doing what, and also be able to keep track of culling for culling purposes.
We're going to advance to the next picture, and I want you to tell us a little bit about, for those that aren't familiar with NSIP and some of the data that we use, clearly you're looks like you're doing some scanning here for fetuses. Is this one of the first data points you collect on the production calendar, I guess, if you're thinking about the start of a new year?
You betcha. I would say, one of the most important things is to kind of know what you're expecting, whether it's in the shed or on the range in terms of a paycheck. So we've got the vet tech, and what we try and do is, because we are limited on labor, of course, there's only 3 of us total, I think, doing this operation. And yes, in case anybody's interested, even a guy like me can run a stock recorder and record data. So I'm the guy at the chute with the handheld you can see in the one picture, recording the data and getting those points so we know kind of what our paycheck's going to be this fall.
So you're already projecting the minute you get some of those scans a little bit, I imagine, right? Not jinxing yourself for those that are superstitious, but you're using this information right out of the start gate.
Yeah, well, when we get the scans back, or the results back on the scans, it also helps us with the fact that now, as of this year, all of our lambing jugs are portable, so to speak. We can tear them down easily, reconfigure them. This year with our range conditions over the summer and going into the fall with no green up, we definitely had a lower lambing percentage, more singles than in past years. So we looked at it and we really don't need to set up as many jugs. We need more mixing pens. Mixing pens are awesome because I don't have to clean them. So, I mean, that's really what one of the bright sides of the scanning is. We can look at it and go, we're expecting way more multiples. We need more jugs. The first time lambers are going to lamb at a higher lambing percentage than we expected. We definitely need more jugs. Or like this year, we're going to have a lower lambing percentage. We don't need as many jugs. We are going to move more towards mixing pens, right? From when those ewes get the lambs dried off and get them branded, they go immediately into a mixing pen.
So you're using this information to adapt, and that's what I want to highlight here. So we're going to go ahead and go to the next slide. I want to keep that thought at the forefront as we talk about how you're using this information to make decisions. But I know you're in the thick of lambing now, but in that same thought of preparation and how you adapt your barn space, tell us a little bit about this photo and the procedure you go through to save some labor on the back end.
Yeah, so we run, once we've got all the ewes sheared and scanned, we go back through and when we're doing back pour, anytime before hopefully lambing, we go through, and as long as they're caught, we use the Tapari Junior, and we number brand them just with a 1 through whatever. It doesn't matter. There's no correlation, but it's a visual for us in our drop pin. We pre-number those ewes so that when we get them in the barn and need to tag them and stuff, or pull them into the shed for ID purposes with the ewes and lambs together, we can match those ewes and lambs really easily and verify that the drop that the vet predicted is correct and go from there. So
yeah, and what we're doing there, like Court said, we're pre-paint branding the ewes before lambing. We also put number brand on their hip to identify what they're expected to drop, whether if they have no brand, then they're going to have a single. If they have a 2, they're going to have multiples, so that when the ewe starts lambing, we kind of have an idea what to suspect. I always have a happy thought that it'll help me with grafting. It doesn't. I'm not that inspired. But the flip side is when we're out there at 2 o'clock in the morning and there's a pile of lambs, at least we have a pretty good idea who's supposed to end up with twins, instead of the ewe that's taken all 4 of them and she has a single mark. So I mean, that it's very handy that way. And also, as the person that's in charge of all the branding and tagging, having the ewes pre-branded before lambing makes things go much faster for me when I don't have to worry about handling that ewe in the jug. All I'm worried about is handling the lambs.
I would say that she can process the lambs and record the mother ID with the Shearwell system probably in about 3 or 4 minutes when she's clicking right along. Whereas if we were having to go back and whether it's take a paint up the alley to paint that ewe and match that visual up, it's not a necessity. It's something that we like to do, the visual brand, but it would add considerably, probably twice as much time for each ewe, I would say.
Is this system, and we can advance to the next slide, but clearly you guys are adapting based on the information that you have. And I'm interested to hear how this process has evolved, because I know you're brilliant, but it probably didn't start this way. I mean, talk to us about the evolution of this planning ahead, painting ahead, using the equipment to save you time down the line. I mean, what does your communication look like?
So when I first married Chris, she came with a horse and 40 registered sheep.
And a handicapped cat.
And I'm not a spring chicken, but I'm not over the hill either. So I soon learned that trimming ram's feet was a challenge for somebody of my athletic ability. So we started purchasing some equipment. We started with the Seidel Spin Doctor on the right side of the screen there where the alley's currently hooked up. That was a huge improvement over what we've been doing, tipping those animals. We've got some other tools that help us there. We've gone to the Hoof Boss in term, when we have to trim feet so that it's not a hand trim job. It's a power tool kind of thing. Speeds everything up a little bit. The next piece of equipment that we actually invested in, it's not in this picture, but there's a scale that was basically a vet scale that you'd use for a dog. And we had I built a crate to go over the top of it. And that worked great. We sped things up considerably over utilizing a balance scale. And then we decided we had enough animals at that point that maybe we needed to keep a little better data and be able to be a little more efficient. And we started looking at the green crate, the shear well. And from a cost perspective, that was about the time we really decided we needed to take more data on the commercial sheep in order to make that machine pay. We needed to find our poor performers and what wasn't working or what was working. We found our ideal body weight for a ewe perspective in terms of pounds of lambs weaned in our country. It's different everywhere. So that gave us justification with the addition of those commercial ewes going through that green crate, which required a lot more EID tags. And after tagging that many animals, then we kind of, I don't remember, one of the first years they actually offered the junior. We bought the junior because we were worming, whatever you've got to do in a race. We were just wearing ourselves out. It was a 2-day project, and we were toast. You're looking at the help. And so we decided we needed to make another investment. We could have gone with a total system. The Tapari does make that total system. We looked at it and decided for our purposes that we would rather have the individual pieces. That green scale, once it sits there, it's there. It'll be there in June, and it'll sit there until just about shearing time. Either sorting animals for us or taking weights, whereas those other ones are all pretty portable. As needed, bring them in, use them, get them out of the shed so you got the room.
Mike, I'm going to have you play that video on the next slide as I ask this question to the Biebers. You mentioned that you're using this to make some real-time decisions, to say who are your bottom end ewes, who are your top end ewes. Obviously, pounds of lamb is a big one, but you alluded to the ewe size that you was kind of a threshold for you in your operation. Walk us through how you use those records in real time to make a decision.
So we go through and we weigh everything. And the nice thing with that crate is that you can weigh, I think the most animals we weighed in one day was 1,800, and it took 6 hours to weigh 1,800 of them. And so it's a lot of data. And it's going to sound like a sales pitch for Shearwell and FarmWorks. It's not. That's just the program that I'm used to. I take all that data, import it into the computer over lunch, and I can identify my bottom end as far as pounds weaned. The FarmWorks program gives you a ratio or a percentage of that ewe's total pounds of her body at weaning compared to what she weaned. And I can sort it for the bottom end and
for the top end.
For the top end. That's where your replacement ewes in theory come from. And so I can go through, get those girls started off. And our initial thought when we started this is we wanted to find those ewes that they do okay in the lambing barn, in the lambing facility, and then they go out and just drop their lambs and walk away. We're like, we're going to get rid of all of these nasty creatures and it's going to be awesome. And then we discovered those don't actually really exist. But what do exist are ewes that continually every year go out with a set of twins and bring in one dinky lamb at like 50 pounds at 5 months old, and the ewe is a body condition score of 4. And that's not something that I want to continue with. And so that's actually what one of our first sorts, we took weights 2 years in a row because any ewe can have a bad year for whatever reason. We wanted 2 years in a row for data to kind of get a trend going, I suppose. And so when we did that sort, we sorted off some absolutely beautiful ewes that had weaned 30% of their body weight 2 years in a row. And the next year doing it, we really had eliminated most of our dinky potty lambs because they came off of those ewes. So that's really what we're looking at as far as data. And the interesting thing for us was to discover that while we definitely have some ewes that their larger body size does not bring in us in any more pounds of lamb, we also definitely have a end that they are too small. Their body size is not made for our conditions. You know, 130-pound ewe will never wean more than 130 pounds for lambs. Whereas 150-pound ewe can, you know, on a half decent year can wean 200 pounds of lamb. You know, what's the 20 pounds on that ewe's frame and condition makes a huge difference.
So this next slide, you guys took this video. We'll see if we can get it to play here. Talk us how you're sorting these ewes. Are you just collecting weights here, or how are you using this?
No, we actually had a discussion about what exactly we were sorting here, and we couldn't remember. I think this is actually a yearling ewe sort or a hogget sort. I would imagine watching it, one direction is registered animals, the other direction is commercial animals, or it could be sorting twins versus singles. And that's one of the nice things with this is with that stock recorder and the EID tags, I can ask it to do very particular sorts. You know, I'm looking for the daughters of ewes that have had twins 3 years in a row and weaned twins. And I can do that sort without having to go back through and mark things up. I just have their IDs in the program and they're in a management group and I tell it to sort right. And so that's been a real nice change for us. It's definitely helped us with accuracy and making informed management decisions. This is also how we sort for all of our bucking groups. We sort 3 different ways and end up with, at the end of the day, we end up with, I think, 15 different bucking groups. So it's definitely a labor savings tool.
Lots to unpack here. I mean, and I think we'll save some for our panelists, but suffice it to say, a lot of this information is guided by your enrollment in NSIP, the data you collect, and the specific selection emphasis you're putting on your stud flock, right? I mean, that's dictating a lot of this.
Yes, I would say, you know, at the end of the day, what started the whole thing going was definitely the registered side of things, collecting the data. I mean, at the end of the day, if a cow man isn't paying attention to how big that calf is coming off that cow, why aren't we? You know, so that really helped us, especially once we decided we needed to invest in something that was more efficient for us. We could expand that into more sheep, and that has helped overall, I think, across the board on our flock.
That's great. Well, we're going to shift gears a little bit. And again, I encourage those listening to save those questions for the end. I'm getting, want to make sure that I cover some of your lambing setup. And you alluded to this early, you're using information to guide the setup each year, how heavy your drop is going to be. So let's go to this next slide, Micah, of their lambing setup. You just recently also renovated your system here. It's a beautiful system. Weld, you're going to get some requests for welding jobs here in fabrication, so I apologize.
I've got a guy that you can call.
So talk to us about what we're seeing here and what some of the adaptations you've made over the years.
Sure. So this is a 1971 pole barn that we had a bunch of jugs in, wood frame jugs. Everything had swinging gates, but it was heavy enough that we couldn't just tear it down. One of our main concerns was at shearing time, we needed more shed space. Price of a new pole barn, Regan probably has an answer for that number, but it's fairly spendy nowadays. We looked at this shed and said, you know, what if we could just smash all this stuff over to the corner and actually be able to use this facility that we've got. So we decided we were going to do that. We invested a couple grand in steel and a little of my time, and we built some nice, fairly light jug fronts, I guess, utilizing a bunch of our infrastructure that was already there, so that we can take it apart and utilize it right after shearing if we need to, or before shearing if we've got to keep stuff dry. So.
Next slide, Mike. I want to point out, I think this is something that as we think about design and dimensions, clearly there's a method to your madness as you redesign this, or in the past, talk to us about that.
Yeah, so when we first set this up, it was all set up on 4-foot jugs. That's kind of what my dad always used for the size of our ewe. I know, like if you've got Suffolks or a bigger sheep, get into the Columbias. This size probably isn't adequate. But we run with a 4x4 basically. In terms of that, we do have some bigger pens, what we call the birthing pens. If we've got somebody started, we can bring them into the shed, and they've got a little more room to turn around. But once they're done lambing and have those lambs dried off, then they'll go in a jug. But a lot of what you're seeing here, other than the new fronts, the brand new looking things with the gates on them, just about everything in this barn is recycled, whether it's old steel posts, boards out of an old house, pipe out of an old windmill, old hog panels turned into hay feeders in the middle. So, kept the cost pretty low from the original part of it. So,
such an important point, Cord. You just procure some of this stuff over time and hang on to it, or do you seek it out? I mean, for those listening, what's the best way that you've been able to find these repurposed materials?
Well, unfortunately, I was 4th generation, and the first, second, and third were very much hoarders. So I had a bunch of old U posts that didn't ever work, that got retired and left in a pile. And I looked at them and said, there's channel iron. Tore down an old house that had gotten moved in and hadn't been occupied since the 70s. That kind of thing. Just took a look at what I had and started to reuse it. So the current picture you've got up is actually something that's all brand new material. This is what we call our portable jug in that bigger barn where we had all of the equipment set up for weighing. When we have cold nights, we'll put the drop in, and these are portable pins that we've got that just pin up just like a Seidel pin. This is all new material, so
excellent.
They collapse. Yep, they got hinges on them, so they fold up, or you can fold them out, and they're an 8-foot panel if that's what you need down the road. So,
and you can use your space in other areas. Go next slide, Micah. Talk to us about this feeding arrangement and how this evolved a little bit.
So we used to use round bale feeders. Phenomenal amount of waste with them. Reloading more often than not. If they found a favorite bale, all of a sudden a drop maybe was out of hay that shouldn't have been. From a time perspective, we started chopping feed and found that we needed a better feeder. Kind of had this design over at my father-in-law's, and I just started building stuff from scratch, made a jig, and I don't know, he bought some, I built some. There's probably between the two places, there's somewhere around 120 or 130 of these.
Expanded wire on the bottom there to keep it from falling out underneath. That height works pretty good for you, looks like.
Yep, it's a good height. We did the expanded wire because I wanted that material to be able to breathe. If we got snow or rain, it's not 100% foolproof, but from a waste perspective, I would say that we are saving, oh gosh, if we're wasting 20% anymore, that's because of the wind more than anything with the chop feed. But one person can go out. We've got, I think, 8 of these. These are 24x8 feeders. You can go out and pitch those all in about 15 to 20 minutes if you really want to. So,
wow. I'm resisting the impulse to ask a lot of questions, but we're going to keep moving. Let's go to the next slide. What do we got here?
So this is one of our bigger pens with our drop. It's just a big lot that we had out back, bigger pen. We split it in half so we put so many ewes per feeder, basically. And then where you see the 2 gates coming out, that's an alley going to our jug facility. Basically, more gates is more control, wings to be able to move those animals out. This is a 1-person setup. If you can't get sheep out of here, you're a cow man.
Way to make friends, honey.
Well, that's perfect. It's adapted for that purpose so that you guys, your labor and your large crew of 2, can get it done. All right, what's the next slide we got, Micah? I think we're moving into some more lambing management. I see you have the essential hydration Gatorade there. What else are we looking at?
You got to stay carved up in this operation.
Right.
So this is where I do all my branding and tagging. Looking at this picture as it's set up now, right behind me is birthing jugs. And the black kind of computer looking thing is my stock recorder that I record all of the all of the IDs into. And so I go through, tag lambs, match it to the mothers. With our NSIP bucking groups and whatnot, I have preloaded into that stock recorder who the sires are based off of the ewes. And I'll record, any sort of ID marks in the lamb's ears, brand them, put them back with their mothers. What I like about this operation, kind of backing up, I come from a NSIP operation. My parents had NSIP sheep. I got my first NSIP sheep when I was 2. And so taking data is just something that has always been identified with sheep. And what I like about this barn is all of these alleys are definitely very conducive for one person being able to move sheep around easily. And, being able to handle them. The operation I came from is a lot more open spaces that you have to either hope that the ewe follows you really well or be really good with the sheep hook. And right about now, I hope my parents aren't watching this. And so that's one thing I will say, just looking at this picture, that I have found personally has been very handy, is all of these alleys make it easy to handle sheep with one person, with less frustration from the handler, and I think lower stress for the sheep, because they don't, their way of getting out is generally the direction I want them to go. So I'm not putting a whole bunch of pressure on them, spooking them, making them stressed. But yeah, no, go ahead.
Is there any initial data that when you're processing like this, beyond birth weights, birth type, those kind of things, any scoring systems that you're plugging into your recorder?
I'm actually doing an udder score system for NSIP is rolling out a GEMS project. Right now, it's only dealing with Rambouillets, Katahdins, Polypays, and Suffolks. Because I love taking data, I decided I'd do the udder score thing as well, which has actually been really handy. Just going through and getting an idea what the udder structure is on our ewes. So that's the initial information taking for the ewes, aside from, number of lambs born. Then when I tag the lambs, I do a birthing ease score, which with the way our operation works is generally, unobserved. If it is observed, there's probably a problem. And then lamb vigor, how quickly that lamb gets up. When we go out there, is it up and sucking already, or is it trying to die? So that's the kind of the initial. I also take birth weights, just because that's moving forward next year. It's nice to know which ram through massive lambs and don't put them on 2-year-olds.
And of course, you never have any entropians or hairy lambs, so we won't.
Oh no, absolutely not.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so we're going to go. Thank you for answering that. I think a really good slide here kind of shows a Cadillac setup. You want to tell us about this?
So this is my older sister came home from having a grown-up job for about 20 years, and she's helping my parents lamb. And she's like, did you know there's a lot of walking involved at mom and dad's lambing barn to tag and brand? I was like, yeah, that's why I don't go over during lambing. And so she and her fiance over the winter made this lammy cart for my dad that he can take through his different pens and go through and brand and tag and record all of the data. And since he's dad, he has 3 different sets of brands on there. I'm not sure what he uses 3 sets for, but he has all of the equipment he needs to go through, and he can take it down there. How long do you think that barn is that they use?
Oh gosh, so it's probably 50, 2 pens of 50. You can kind of see in the second picture that the jugs are ringed around the outside 3 sides, 4x4 jugs there. So, yeah, so he used to come back to a central station. He would walk to each of those jugs, pick that lamb up, wand the ewe, bring it back to the paint and the brands and all of the other good stuff, and then walk the lamb back. And if there was twins or triplets, that's a lot of trips. So this should be good for him. We'll see what his review is after this year.
I mean, all joking aside, it is a high quality, unit, but
Yeah.
I do think you just nailed it. Like the pacing back and forth, that time spent and the wear and tear on you physically,
Mhm.
these types of pieces of equipment that you've highlighted really make a difference in that regard.
Yeah, the one thing I would say, I really like the design of this, but in our particular setup, it's almost too big. It won't fit our alleys. And I don't know if I would necessarily trade this for how our barn is set up, if that makes sense. This is a great tool for the right operation.
Absolutely.
If I had really long runs of jugs,
Yeah.
I'd probably use it.
Yeah, like back with that picture of where I have all my tagging and whatnot. Most of my farthest walk to tag at that point is about 25 feet, just because of the way it's set up with the with the alley with jugs facing in on the alley. You walk back and I mean that ends up being a lot of walking at the end of the day, but it's pretty doable. But where Dad's working in multiple pens, this cart really helps a lot.
I want to point out, I want to thank Dylan for help working with you and putting these photos together. Truly, really great resource for us to wrap our mind around. As we move into the questions and discussion section of this, I'm gonna ask a question again, and this may be a bit redundant, but you've made these investments also for wear and tear on your own bodies, right? I mean, none of us are aging backwards. Have you noticed a difference physically in some of these things that used to really just beat you up? You had to recover for a week, and now you're a little better off?
Certainly with if you've ever gotten in on a worming operation in the fall through a 4-foot wide alley and had to grab those heads and jerk them around, I tell you what, once you use that blue crate, you'll never go back. We had some blood drawn. MSU came down, Extension came down here the other day, and I asked Brent, they said, should I have the blue crate? And he said, no, we'll just put them in a pen. Well, I decided that was fine because he said he was bringing 3 people, 2 to do the work and 1 to hold the sheep. And when they got here, there was only 2. And I was a little disappointed because I certainly would have got my blue crate out, pushed that button 50 times. So.
Yeah, no, that blue crate, when we wormed here, I think it was last fall, we timed it and we, I guess it was bagging.
We bagged.
Yeah, we're bagging ewes. We bagged 400 head of ewes in 62 minutes through that blue crate. And I mean, you don't wrestle with them. I actually do think at the end of the day, it's less stressful for the ewes because we aren't wading through the alley and they turn around when you get done bagging them, and then you have to go and turn them back around to get them out the alley. That ewe's following her friend up the alley. She gets caught for about 3 seconds. She checked her bag, push the button, and away she goes back with her friends. And so I really am a big fan of anything that helps us make our workday both less stressful for the people and less stressful for the sheep, because at the end of the day, they're a lot easier to work with if they aren't experiencing stress every time they come through. The same thing's true with that green crate. At this point, they're following their friends. They go up, get in the green crate. They're stuck there for about 3 seconds, and one of the gates opens and they walk out. And it's interesting to watch how fast they figure out what they're supposed to do. And we stand back most of the time. I don't know if the sheep really realize we're there. And they're just following their friends through to go get on with their day.
Give you a little idea with that blue crate came in around $8,500 5 years ago, I think, when we got it. $8,500 is pretty cheap labor going forward. There's no way I could have afforded to have a third person out here for the amount of time that saves me. We did not go for the real fancy setup. This is simply air powered. It's a button. Somebody's got to be there to push the button to catch them. Somebody's got to be there to push the button to let them out. You don't have to have an EID tag to use that blue crate. That was a huge selling point because it's portable. Then we can take it down to our other place and utilize it down there. All I need is a generator and a little air compressor, and we're in business. So.
And that's awesome. Think about medical bills too. I think those may be less, right? Yeah. Yeah. So, well, I think this is outstanding, and I want to open up. We got a question, but I want to open up questions to both our panelists, the Biebers and Regan Smith, about their systems, whatever it may be. So, Mike, I'll let you moderate some of these as these are coming in, if that's all right.
You bet. Yep. So we've got one that came through the Q&A from David, and this is for the Biebers. How do you track and identify the weight of lambs for an individual ewe?
At weaning, it goes through the green crate. All of their tags are tied together. The lambs are identified as being birthed by that ewe, or if I graft, I record in the stock recorder that I've grafted this lamb onto this ewe's ID, so that lamb's weaning weight is attributed to her, to the graft ewe. It's all works through the EID program in my computer in the stock recorder.
The start of it, I guess, is also when we're processing through the lambing barn, she's identifying those lambs. And when she's tagging, that ewe gets credit for those lambs. That's where it all starts, whether it's the birth weight. And then when we start running through the crates, every time that ewe and those lambs go through, whether it's milk weights or weaning weights, then it's all attributed to that ewe. And you can look at those reports. It'll print a report out for you, and you can look at them and make judgment calls from that.
Got it. So that's a matter of you managing the software, which then is managing your data.
Mm-hmm.
Is that accurate? Okay.
Yeah,
And
yep.
I guess I have a follow-up just for anyone that maybe is not familiar with the technology, with the EID systems and the software. And that's intimidating to me because I don't know a lot about it. So could you talk a little bit about the learning curve with learning how to manage your data using some of these tech tools?
So I guess, like I said earlier, I come from history of collecting data, and the EID tags seemed like they would be an easier way, a more time effective way, because accuracy is there, but efficiencies. The learning curve on this, being honest, one of the reasons I picked this program is, one, it interfaces with NSIP easily, and two, this is to some degree made for dummies. I put the tag in. It's really good with prompting you know what you need to do next. Also going, you did this wrong, try again. And the reports are pre-set up. You don't have, I mean, you can tweak with them some, but like the weaning ratio report, I took these weights on the ewes and I took the weights on the lambs. I marked this is a weaning weight. And then I go to the dam progeny report, and it's already got that report all set up for me with the ratios. Dylan gives me crap because I mess up on Excel spreadsheets and aren't as good with computers as he is. So I stick with the one that's better for us older millennials. But being honest, my dad got into the EID tags here probably 5 years ago, and he figured it out. So, I mean, there is a learning curve. You need to be not afraid to push buttons, and also have the tech support on speed dial. I did that a couple of times. They're really good to work with. But it is a pretty user-friendly program. I'd actually say it's more user-friendly than NSIP. I'm not familiar with like Gallagher or their system at all. I'm just familiar with FarmWorks, but it is intimidating, but once you get into it, it's pretty straightforward.
Hey, Kristin, you had mentioned the reports, and sorry, I did have a slide. I must not have put it on here, but what reports do you guys specifically use, and how does that help you guys make decisions, say at weaning time?
So again, we use the weaning ratio report. That is just the dam's weight, total pounds of lamb. The lambs are itemized for individual birth weight. It's totaled. And then it gives you a percentage of that ewe's body weight that she weaned. And the other thing that I appreciate in that report is it highlights if a lamb died. If we on that stock recorder, you can record deaths, cause of death, all that. So if say she had a set of twins, One died in a mixing pen 10 days later because it was dumb and got stuck in a feeder. I have that in the stock recorder. And when that ewe comes through at weaning, it shows her live lamb at X weight. She also had another lamb. It died on this date, and this is the reason why. So that's probably the main report we use. The other report that we use, because we raise rams, is the FarmWorks will set up a average daily gain report for you when you run your rams through. I can itemize it by sires or sort it by sires, so I can see which sires are giving me my best growth trait rams. I can also do that, break it down and do growth based on dams. Not as fun. We also look at a lot of death reports. What was our main cause of death this past year? Are we looking at a nutritional issue? Are we maybe having some parasite issues? So you can go through and sort it and figure out where our main cause of death is. That something we can address in the future, or is it just sheep being sheep?
Great. We've got two more in the queue, one pretty short one and then one good one that I think will help us wrap up the evening together. So the first one, what was the blue crate? Is that the Seidel Spin Doctor? It's a question from Dave. Is that, I think, in regards to the trimming the rams hooves?
Yeah.
Yep.
We bought that, oh shoot, that was 14 years ago. And that thing has staying power because I think we put probably 60 to 70 head of yearling rams through that a year. And then probably another 20 head of aged rams. Then my dad borrows it and it bounces down the gravel road and gets set up at his place. And he puts another 60 to 70 head of yearling rams through it. This Seidel Spin Doctor has been a really great purchase. And I'm not a terribly big person, about the size of an average seventh grader, apparently. And I can tip rams in that thing pretty easily.
One thing I would caution from a time perspective, if you're doing more than probably that's 75 head at a time, I would, the Tapari also has a tip feature. I'm not sure if it'd be as handy for trimming. But if you get over that 75, maybe 100 head, the spin doctor's going to take more of a toll on you because you are the one physically spinning that. So, and shutting it.
Sure. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a great tidbit in there for sure. Okay.
If I could turn it hydraulically, turn it into a hydraulic one, I would. We'll see. Yeah. Stay tuned for next year.
Yeah. Great. All right, and then we're about out of time together, so let's round out with this question. With a preference for Regan answering first, if he's still there. From Brent, do you think investments in equipment and facilities to reduce workload will help with keeping the next generation interested in raising sheep? Regan, if you're out there.
Yeah. Am I back on?
You're back.
Yeah. Apparently my picture went away, which is a good thing. I think if you make working sheep easier, it's going to help keep the next generation. They still got to have a knack for livestock and like livestock. You can't, we can control the weather by being inside and so on, but that's certainly a step in the right direction of having investment in labor and facilities. But after 53 years of this, I've worked a lot of college kids over the years and a lot of good ones, and the people either got a knack for livestock or they don't. It's certainly an art. And I've had kids that wanted to help in the worst way, but they were the worst help. All of us that have worked livestock know that just the positioning 2 foot 2 inches one way or the other makes a world of difference. And some people have it and some people don't. And I don't think it's like an instinct in a guard dog. Either they got it or they don't, and you can't drive it in.
Appreciate that. Beavers, your perspective?
You know, I worked sheep with my parents, and I would say most of the improvements came because I was frustrated. So if you're frustrated, you don't like your job, you're going to leave most times. The difference was I decided I liked what I was doing, so I changed it so that it was more enjoyable. Hopefully that is something that carries through with our children, and they continue. If one or all comes back, hopefully they continue to innovate and move our facility and our ranch forward. Will it look the same? I don't think mine looks the same as my parents. So, you know, it doesn't have to be the way Grandpa did it. I think that's probably the big takeaway, you know.
Gates with hinges.
Gates with hinges, portability. We could pack up tomorrow and sell just about everything because it's all panels. So, yeah, you know, having things be enjoyable is part of the battle. If I could figure out how to get water in my barn so I could just hook a hose up and water all of the jugs at one time, I would. But it's a 1971 built on a slope, and it's pretty hard. When you got a 2-foot drop, those ewes in the bottom would have to be pretty tall to get a drink. So someday.
Yeah. Well, thank you once again to Cord and Kristin Bieber and Regan Smith for sharing their expertise with us this evening. I know there are at least a couple questions that trickled in late here. Apologies that we're not going to take time to get to those. Please send those in the evaluation that we have here for you this afternoon, and we'll try to get those addressed, or reach out to any one of us on the sheep task force, and we will get you in touch with the right person. Just a couple announcements here as we're wrapping up. We do have 2 upcoming events that I wanted to draw your attention to. The first is this task force is hosting a Managing for Parasites workshop in the Fremont County area on Wednesday, May 29th. So if you're interested in that, I'll be sending out information on how to register in the follow-up email that comes following this webinar closing down. And the second is the Sheep and Wool Festival hosted by the Wyoming Wool Growers Association. And that will be July 12th and 14th in Thermopolis, Wyoming. So mark your calendars for those 2 or 3 days. It's a really, really wonderful event, emphasizing the colorful history of the sheep industry in the state, from range lambing all the way through processing those fleeces into their different uses. And we're going to have lots of cultural emphasis as well. So really a really great event that I would recommend. Thank you all for attending. You will be prompted to an evaluation following the webinar. I think you'll have to click confirm to actually enter that form, but please do give us your input so we know how to improve what we're doing. It reassures us that we're moving in the right direction and helps us kind of refocus if we're not. Please give us your honest feedback that way, and we look forward to hosting another webinar similar to this in the future. For my fellow co-hosts tonight and others on the task force, what did I miss? Is there anything else we need to cover?
Thank you, Micah. Thank you, speakers.
Yeah, thanks,
We
Micah,
appreciate
for
you.
all your work.
All right. Thank you everyone so much for your time, and have a great evening.